The corruption trial against two former FirstEnergy executives ended in a hung jury. Now what? High-speed chases by Cuyahoga County Sheriff's deputies have resulted in the deaths of two innocent bystanders. Their families have filed suit. Pothole complaints are way up and more traffic annoyances on the way. We'll explain. And remember the Ferris wheel at the IX Indoor Amusement Park? Well, it's for sale. And is your backyard big enough for that? Joining me to discuss these stories and more in studio, Gabriel Kramer and Deputy Editor Glenn Forbes. Gabe's a reporter here. Glenn's an editor here. Good to have both of you with us.
Good to be here.
Happy Friday, Mike.
And happy Friday to you. I look forward to that every time you're on the show. And from our State House News Bureau, and actually gracing us today with her presence in studio in Cleveland instead of remotely from Columbus, a woman who bypasses Ferris wheels for terror-inducing roller coasters, always no hands.
Fair,
Karen Kassler.
absolutely.
Very good to have you with us. And we're honored that you showed up in person just for the debut of our hour-long 5 p.m. WVIZ broadcast. There's no other reason that you would have been in Cleveland on this particular day, would there?
No, of course not. Go
No?
Guardians.
Go Guardians. So we get that at the beginning of every show, and today's particularly important. It's home opener day today.
Finally, we made it. So great.
You got here yesterday. You're going to be at the game this afternoon. Looks like
Absolutely.
weather is going to clear up.
Let's cross our
You're
fingers.
crossing
It's
your
been a
fingers.
long time since we've had it. Well, the last year's home opener was frigid, so
Yeah.
it's got to be better than that.
Do you have your parka just in case?
I have everything. I have a poncho. I have everything.
I love it. All right, if you want to weigh in on any of our topics today, perhaps the apparel you should be wearing at the Guardians game, you can shoot us an email, soi@ideastream.org. And right now, let's get ready to roundtable. Summit County Judge Susan Baker Ross declared a mistrial in the state corruption case against two former FirstEnergy executives, all related to the HB6 bribery scandal, after a jury failed to reach a verdict. And Karen, what comes next?
Well, I think there were a lot of people who were expecting this kind of a result because it had been so long. The jury had asked 9 questions. Only a few of them were made public. But then the day before, they indicated to the judge that they were at an impasse. They had told her, and she told them to go back into deliberations. So I don't think this was a huge surprise. And now what happens is, now that we have a mistrial, there's going to be another pretrial conference coming up, and the process kind of starts all over again because Attorney General Dave Yost, who filed these charges against former CEO Chuck Jones and former Vice President Michael Dowling, says he wants to retry them. The state will retry them.
So they will be back at it in that case. The defense had asked for a dismissal of
Yes.
the charges, and the judge didn't allow that.
Yeah, they filed motions for acquittal, basically saying that the case, of course, involves a payment made to the late Sam Randazzo as he was becoming Public Utilities Commission chair in 2019, which was just before House Bill 6, the billion-dollar nuclear power plant bailout, went through. And prosecutors say that was a bribe. And lawyers for Jones and Dowling say, no, that was a payment to him, to clients he represented. He stole that money. And so he also even wasn't a public official at the time the payment was made. So the argument's been there's no bribery. And that's what the defense's argument was. Obviously, it had some weight with at least a couple of the jurors because they did not find him guilty, or
Yeah.
did not find them guilty.
And when you say a couple of jurors, Glenn, that's specifically the case. We were able to hear from several of the jurors after the trial, and they both indicated that at one point it was 10-2 in favor of conviction on some of the charges, at least. At some point it was like 8-4, but the majority thought that a crime had happened. There were some, though, that just weren't convinced. And one of the keys to that not being convinced, it came in the question that they did send that we do know about to the judge, which was, can you bribe somebody if they're not a public official yet?
Right. We were kind of watching this the last week or so as it was coming through, and we're saying, okay, they're having trouble here. Like this is not going well. It doesn't appear that they're going to be able to reach unanimous verdict, and of course they did not. As you mentioned, Mark Baumann was a juror. He spoke to a number of reporters. He said it's anywhere between 8-4 to 10-2. On the guilty side, of course, you need all 12. Jackie Stewart was a juror who spoke to the Akron Beacon Journal. She said the bribery charge is where they had the most dissent, and that's the biggest verdict. So basically, she said we couldn't move forward. That's the biggest one we had to decide. And both Baumann and Stewart said there were just some people who said, well, my mind's not going to change. You're not going to change my mind. Many jurors were willing to continue to deliberate, but when you have a couple jurors saying, well,
Yeah,
my mind's not
it's
going to
fruitless.
change this. Yeah.
We've been at it for 9 days.
Yeah,
We've
what
been
do
at the trial for weeks and weeks.
Right. What do you do?
Yeah. Karen, what's interesting here is we know a lot more than the jury knew. For example, how Sam Randazzo died, which was that he died by suicide. We know about Larry Householder, the former House Speaker, and his conviction in relation to HB6 and how that may tie in to the whole scandal. The jury didn't hear this stuff.
Right, and you don't know what jurors knew coming in from just living in Ohio, but they were obviously under orders to not consume media and to really stay away from that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to watch trials like this because, like you said, we knew more than the jury knew. And I have to give a shout out to the judge, Susan Baker Ross in Summit County, for allowing media like me in Columbus to watch by Zoom, because it really helps make the process more transparent and helps me explain what happened.
Yeah, I jumped in when John Husted, the U.S. Senator from Ohio, was doing his testimony, and you could jump in as a media member and take a look at that. What she did not only is to tell the lawyers that you can't get into some of these areas, but she admonished the witnesses, too, to not mistakenly say these types of things.
And that's the caution that anybody who's involved in cases like this has to really listen to, because you don't want to give the jury information they're not supposed to have. And actually, that kind of happened during deliberations. There were some some evidence that got to the jury that shouldn't have gotten to the jury. So that, the judge apologized for that, saying she didn't know how that happened. But that's another interesting note here in all this.
Yeah, in fact, it was, I think, during the session that you and I were both watching where there was the Mount Rushmore picture, and that wasn't supposed to get in, and somehow they were accusing the prosecution of trying to backdoor it.
And I thought that one was really interesting because there were references to that, but that wasn't supposed to be in evidence. That came up in the federal trial as well. And this is, of course, the meme of Mount Rushmore with a couple of the
Chuck Jones,
yes.
who was the CEO at the time, right?
Yes.
And Michael Dowling, who the two defendants. in
And
this
Sam
case,
Randazzo.
And one other.
And basically celebrating that House Bill 6 was moving forward.
And Glenn, the real close legal watchers of this would have seen that the prosecution had some other issues from the very beginning, including folks who didn't testify.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for us to forget how juries are put together, right? I mean, they are looking for people who don't have any knowledge of the case. There's this idea that when you put the jury together, they should be completely blank slate. So when we talk about, they had a burning question of how they knew Sam Randazzo died, but they didn't know how.
Right.
It's like, and then they go after the trial and then they find out, this is what Jackie Stewart told the Akron Beacon Journal. Then they look after and they say, that's, he died by suicide. So the prosecution sometimes starts in a high-profile case like this. They start a little bit behind the eight ball at times, but like you said, there were some other issues. His lead investigator never testified. He resigned to avoid being disciplined amid an internal investigation in a separate case. Jackie Stewart also told the Akron Beacon Journal she wished the prosecution had laid out a more clear timeline on some of this stuff. She felt like they could have done a better job there. But yeah, some evidence that couldn't be submitted, the knowledge gap. This will be your favorite one, Mike. They were confused by some of the acronyms, and I don't know a lot of these. I do know PUCO. I know the public utilities. I know HB6, House Bill 6.
House
We
Bill
all know
6,
that
right.
one. They said some of the acronyms, the FES, First Energy Solutions, but PPA, DMR.
Okay, wait, if you're going to say these, you better know what they are.
I don't. Complex information, complex, this alphabet soup.
I'm going to ask
idea.
Lebar to get on that. So it's PPA, you said?
PPA, DMR,
All right, that's
ESP.
Now what's the third
Karen,
one?
any thoughts?
We're going to get them. Lee will give them. We're going to have them before this segment is over.
And it
at
really
least
also
before the show
shows
is over.
how complicated the federal trial was with Householder and former Ohio Republican Party Chair Matt Borges, where the jury did convict those defendants and the complicated information. We're talking with this trial, hundreds of exhibits, dozens of witnesses. 6 weeks of testimony here. And I should also correct myself here on the meme that we were talking about. It was actually Michael Dowling, Sam Randazzo, and then two lobbyists who were pictured on that as opposed to Chuck Jones.
Oh, it wasn't me. You're correcting me. That's okay. You can correct me. I was wrong.
But it was one of those things that shouldn't have been in evidence, but certainly was referred to, and so it was one of the concerns.
All right. By the way, just right off the top of my head, I figured out that purchase power agreement is PPA.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
All right.
Top of your head.
Yeah, just off the top of my head. I'm not looking at a screen that Leah's typing to me. But I got to tell you, that does make the important point that you can't be using initials and acronyms when you're trying to talk to people about things because they're not in your business and they don't know. And that's why we try to fight them on this show. Okay, I feel vindicated. The jury did not reach a verdict in this case, but they did unanimously say that we should not have acronyms. Right? I won.
Something along
Okay,
those lines.
fair
Yes,
enough.
I'll give you that.
Let's move on to our next story. And we're gonna, by the way, that story is going to continue. We'll be certainly covering if and when another trial happens. The families of two innocent bystander women killed in separate high-speed pursuits by the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Downtown Safety Patrol have sued the county. Glenn, let's talk about the scope of the. First of all, the Safety Patrol has a different name now. But what is the scope of these lawsuits?
Goes back to 2025. Two women were killed 5 months apart. Sharday Elder and Tamia Westmoreland. Both were struck by fleeing suspects in these cases. The family's attorney, Stanley Jackson, these are civil suits, of course. He said that the pursuits were based on minor traffic violations, and essentially they never should have happened. Both of these chases got up over 100 miles per hour. He's saying that that's way too dangerous for traffic violations. There's no reason to continue that pursuit. Interestingly, both pursuits involved the same sheriff's deputy, Casey Loudermilk. I should note he was cleared of any criminal charges, but after the second death, he was placed on leave after that second crash. And as you mentioned, the State Downtown Safety Patrol has since been renamed, but there's a lot here. As you mentioned, too, the chase policy has also changed, and we're going to get into that.
Yeah, let's do that with Gabe. So they, I mean, these are tragic incidents. The police are trying to pursue somebody in both of these cases. I think it was traffic stops in the middle of downtown, chased after folks who decided not to stop, and it ended in these tragedies. What is the change then that the sheriff's office has implemented?
So this new policy limits chases to, I guess, suspects that are suspected to be violent felons or drunk drivers after two crashes. So they have to have some information on who they're after. But the pushback is from Stanley Jackson, the attorney, saying, we should have been involved in this. We should have had some input from community, but particularly from the Elder and Westmoreland families. There was efforts to hear from the county who declined to comment on the situation.
I talk to police officers too who feel frustrated because if you have a policy where you can't pursue, then people can basically act with abandon and just, take off and you can't chase me. So they get upset about that. On the other hand, if a chase can end in the death of an innocent life, or the taking of an innocent life, it's a whole another level.
And that's essentially what Jackson is saying, is that they want to put an end to these chases completely for the sake of just keeping people alive.
By the way, DMR, Distribution Modernization Rider, suddenly that came to me as well.
Didn't know that one at all.
Me neither. I don't know what any of
That's
these
the
are.
first
I would
time
never
I've
use
ever
that.
heard that.
All right. According to a report from the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio, by the end of last year, 14 of the state's 88 counties had agreements to cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement efforts or the U.S. Marshals Service. And it was just a couple a few years ago, Gabe. You've spent some time looking at the agreements between ICE and law enforcement. Different types of agreements. Explain what those are and why counties might be entering into them.
Yes, so they're called 287G contracts, and there's three different types of contracts. One of which is what we call the jail enforcement model, and I'll try to wrap this up quickly. But
You mean the
essentially,
GEM, J-E-M?
I'm not going to do
Okay,
that. I'm
thank
not
you.
starting that. I'm not starting that. But the jail enforcement model, which essentially allows law enforcement to identify documented immigrants in their custody, whether they're in their jail, and place them into immigration proceedings, whatever that may be from the state level or the local level. There's a task force model, and this one is the most common one. It gives officers immigration enforcement authority. So when they're out patrolling, and they can ask if they are ask people if they're undocumented at a traffic stop, and share that information with ICE. And the last one is called the Warrant Surface Officer Program, where ICE comes to your sheriff's office or your police department, trains, certifies officers to execute administrative warrants. So that's kind of the different ones we're working on, or that we're hearing about. The ACLU did a public records request and provided that information to us earlier this week to say that they found that 19 different counties have have gotten into contracts with ICE for 287G.
Oh, I thought it was 14, so 19.
Well, that's what the ACLU has had from their public records request.
Got it.
What ICE is putting on its website is that there are 14 in Ohio, 14 counties.
And there is a menu. There's 3 things. So
Yeah.
some of them are doing one, some are doing the other, and some are
Right.
doing all 3, including Portage County.
Yeah, so Portage, so in our coverage area in Northeast Ohio, it's Lake County, Portage County, and the Spencer Police Department in Medina County. So those are,
Geauga, Lake, Mahoning.
well, so those are so a little different than the 287G
I see.
is the ICE jail service. So you can get in a contract with ICE to hold undocumented immigrants in their jail, and that one has a bigger financial benefit to hold people in jail. The ICE provides you a pretty hefty, load of cash to hold undocumented immigrants. Now the 287G contracts, those don't have as large of a financial kickback. In fact, ACLU and the Ohio Immigration Alliance are complaining that money that is, tax dollars essentially is being used for such a thing. But I reached out to those counties, to the Spencer Police Department, Medina County, Lorain County, or Lake County officials, and Portage County officials. No response from this week. A year ago, I was able to reach Butler County in Southwest Ohio. Now, a lot of what we're hearing of these 287G contracts, mostly Southwest Ohio, greater Dayton, Cincinnati area. I spoke with the sheriff there, Richard Jones, and he said, look, the benefit to me is that it allows us to patrol our region, allows us to have these powers to, what he said is keep criminals off the streets.
If you'd like to weigh in on any of these topics, including the immigration issue and cooperating with ICE, you can send an email to soi@ideastream.org, and we'll work those into the conversation. Gabe?
And one thing I want to add, in speaking with representatives from the ACLU earlier this week, is they're fearful of expansion of this. They think that this is a way to appeal to a base to Donald Trump's base, who are yearning for this enforcement, because these are areas that don't necessarily have a strong immigration population. And there was a representative in that meeting to talk about how there's concern about this expanding into colleges and universities, which hasn't happened in Ohio yet, but in Florida, there's been a few different campus police departments that have signed on the 287G contracts.
All right, we will definitely keep an eye on that. And what's interesting is you mentioned money is a big driver of this, and we know that ICE has lots of money.
Yeah.
There's a debate now about funding of those types of things, but that funding flowing through to local communities, you can see why they'd say we want a piece of that.
Right.
Question is, are people pushing back against that? Are there people in
Yeah.
these communities that are saying we don't want to cooperate with this organization?
Definitely, especially with the jail models, because in Northwest Ohio, greater Toledo region, there's the Northwest Ohio Corrections Facility that's signed on to be a holding facility for undocumented immigrants. And there was a big debate last year of, this is going to bring a lot of money, but a lot of people were saying, well, this isn't what we want in our communities. And that's what we're hearing from the Ohio Immigration Alliance, saying that, this type of enforcement makes people feel maybe unwelcome, maybe untrustworthy of these law enforcement agencies.
Okay. The crew of Artemis 2 has left the Earth's orbit on its way to the moon. The crew lifted off from Kennedy Space Center on Wednesday for a 10-day mission.
And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool when I was
yeah.
watching
Very
that the
cool.
other day. Nice little break in the day. The Artemis crew is expected to make its closest pass across the far side of the moon on Monday. Cue up Pink Floyd. Before beginning the return trip back to Earth. The success of the mission, which has Cleveland fingerprints all over it, will pave the way for an anticipated return to the lunar surface in 2028 with a goal of establishing a permanent lunar base. And Glenn, I mentioned that Cleveland's fingerprints are all over this. Let's talk about why.
Well, the quote is, they say the road to the moon does run through Ohio. That was everywhere.
And it's, by the way, it's just as potholed as the moon. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, too.
Very good. I knew you were going to work that in. That quote was from Darcy DeAngelis. He's a NASA Glenn Systems Safety Engineer. When you think about both Cleveland and the Neil Armstrong Test Facility in Sandusky, that's where Orion went through some rigorous testing. It splashed down, it was disassembled, it was brought back to Ohio for further testing. And there was another representative from NASA who said it's really the only place you can do this kind of one-stop shop, really hard environmental tests. So we've got the infrastructure to do it. So a lot of tests on Orion several years ago before they were able to launch this.
So a lot of people at NASA Glenn are watching this with a lot of pride as well. They had a big role in what's going on here, as NASA organizations probably throughout the country have.
Absolutely here, but like you said, especially Cleveland, Sandusky, this was a combination both of American and European engineering. So not only here in Ohio and throughout the U.S., but in Europe as well.
Gabe, it's been more than 50 years since the last time NASA launched a manned lunar mission. This isn't quite a lunar mission, it's a drive-by.
Yeah.
But I wonder about inspiring, and you host the show News Depth here on WVIZ. What does something like this do, and I'm sure you'll be covering it, to inspire young people?
Well, not to be self-promotional, but yes, our show News Depth airs later today, Fridays at 1 p.m. on WVIZ. And we get a lot of engagement on stories about outer space. And obviously there's science behind it, but I think there's a lot of wonder with the youth about this. And, not today's show, but next week's show is all about outer space. It's talking about Artemis II and Ohio's history with exploring outer space. And the kids love it. I mean, they really get a lot of engagement. They love writing in. They love doing the poll questions. So there's a lot of interest in this space exploration. So I think, yeah, absolutely. This could inspire some kids to want to get involved and go to the moon or be involved in NASA Glenn down the street. So I think that this is a very exciting time for kids. And I remember John Glenn going out into space as a young kid, being in first grade and seeing that. And that was really awesome. I mean, that was really cool. And I have to imagine that, other first graders or any kids in school will feel the same type of way I do.
You almost made it seem like you felt old by saying that, but I could,
That was his second. That was when he was on the space shuttle.
That's when he was the oldest man in space. He was,
my first interview with anybody famous at college at Bowling Green was John Glenn, who was coming through on a tour to try to retire his presidential campaign debt.
Okay.
That's how old I am. It was after he ran for president. By the way, 1 o'clock is the live airing on WVIZ, but you can catch News Depth online.
Yeah, you can
anytime.
stream it on our PBS platforms, YouTube, anywhere that you can find IdeaStream content available on demand.
And I think you can go to ideastream.org/newsdepth and find it there as well. And Karen, we talked about watching the launch and how exciting it was. A little nerve-wracking, too. All of us who lived through tragedy, the Space Shuttle Challenger back that era when I was in college. So when you watch that, there's a little bit of nerve-wracking trepidation.
Absolutely. It's not a done deal until it's up. I mean, we've seen what's happened.
Right.
And it just, when you watch the video, just the raw power that is behind that. And I got to tell you, the inspiration does apparently work a little bit, because as a parent of a child who is now in college, hoping to build rockets, hoping to do a internship at NASA Glenn, there's definitely some inspiration there to do this.
Did I tell you last week Karen's a good time? If by good time you mean drinking expired Tab Cola, pouring over budgets, and bragging about your son? This is exactly my point.
Can't help
Yeah.
it. Can't help it.
Fair enough.
We're a third of the way there.
By the way,
it has to be expired.
Well,
Well,
it
they don't
has
make
to-
it
they don't make
anymore.
it.
It has to be.
It has to be.
It does
expired.
have to be
And I think
expired.
she has some stash in the basement somewhere.
Gotcha.
I
let
do.
me tell you, that was an incredible, it seems like an incredible trip around the moon, but I think I'd rather make that than drive some of Ohio's roads. And I mentioned that they are kind of moon-pocked. Get ready, drivers. First of all, the official state flower of Ohio, the orange barrel blossom, is blooming on roads everywhere. And I don't know about you, but I'm severely allergic to those. The Ohio Department of Transportation announced a slate of highway projects, including $3.4 billion in new ones and the continuation of several multi-year projects. Glenn, let's talk about what we can expect from some of these projects. And basically anybody on the west side of Cleveland going on I-90 anywhere west is going to be
I was
out
just
of
going to
luck.
say, that's the one near and dear to our hearts, Mike. The one on 90 West is you, a Rocky Riveran, Rocky
90 East,
Riverite.
too. Yeah.
And me living in Westlake, that is going to continue. Only 2.5 years to go on that one, Mike. It's going to be the continuation of $173 million worth of work. You mentioned I-90, the overhauls from West Boulevard through Lakewood into Hilliard Boulevard and Rocky River. Various ramp closings, lane changes, McKinley Avenue entrances currently closed, lane restrictions in place, all that good stuff. We're talking about opening day. Well, just south of Progressive Field, there's a major 6-year, $328 million reconstruction. Lane closings, lane
That's
shifts.
I-90, I-77 area there. Yep.
Yeah, the 90-77 interchange. The highway's going to remain open. There will be some brief closings during off-peak periods. There's more. I was driving through Lorain County yesterday on my way to Sandusky. A lot of barrels over there. That's the second year of $116 million worth of work, 90 from Ohio 611 and Avon to the Turnpike. And then if you're a Cedar Point fan, there's going to be some work along the Rye Beach Road interchange to the Sandusky City line. That's going to go through 2029. Feels like I'm reading from
All
a
right,
list.
let's keep going. Let's go on the list. Gabe, let's get out of Cuyahoga. What else we got?
So in Summit County, there's a widening of I-77 between Ghent Road and Everett, northeast of Akron. And then there's a Route 8 in the Akron area between Perkins and Glenwood Avenue.
You sound like Samson Albo right now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we do. That's a good
The
point.
weather, the traffic report.
Well, hopefully there might be some traffic coming with that in his future, talking about these streets.
Right.
But another replacement of a high-level bridge on Ohio 8. So this I-77 project is supposed to wrap up in 2027. The Ohio 8 is supposed to wrap up in 2028. If I may add about the potholes, they're so bad that I've gotten used to just anticipating them, where I'll be driving and someone asks, why'd you switch lanes? Because I know there's a pothole coming.
Exactly. I've got them memorized. Karen, ODOT's going to be everywhere. Barrels are going to be everywhere. You really got to be careful. Slow down.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been several instances in the last couple of months when we had the snowplows on the road, snowplows getting hit, road crews getting hit, and so ODOT says it's definitely something you should pay attention to. And also, I think there's an overall concern in general about funding all these projects because the gas tax money is not nearly enough in many cases because you have more fuel-efficient cars, so people are using less gas.
All right, let's dig in on potholes. It's been a doozy. Yesterday on I-90, a giant hole kept poaching tires. This is the people that are heading downtown on 90, right about Warren Road. Our producer's partner got nailed in that one. I'm told $1,000 damage. The rim got damaged as well. Off the highways, Cleveland's roads are more mine-friendly than ever. Our Abby Marshall crunched the numbers and found 15,000 pothole repair requests this year, up 50% from last year. She went out and stood next to a road and took some video of that as she did a story. We've been in a roller coaster weather pattern. That's what causes potholes, right, Glenn?
Yeah, 1,500. 1,500 pothole requests.
Okay. What did I say? 15,000?
You did say 15.
It feels like 15,000.
It feels like 15,000. And the one on I-90 yesterday's got to count for more than one. I mean, that's
Exactly.
got to be way more. I learned so much about potholes from Abby Marshall this week. I got to tell you, I never knew, some of these things that we're going to get into. But if you think about it, it seems like in the last, month or so, it's been freeze and then we thaw and then we freeze again and then we thaw again and hopefully we're thawed, but then we're going to freeze again next week. When that happens, you've got water that gets into the potholes. That's according to John Laird, the city's director of public works. You just keep doing it over and over again. So
It pops out the patches.
it pops out the patches. So as many of these kind of freeze thaw patterns that we have, the more and more potholes are going to pop up. And when you think about, we were kind of in this deep freeze starting before Thanksgiving. Then we kind of finally thawed out, and now we're going back and forth. We have these false springs,
Right.
and then we go back to winter. And luckily for opening day, it would be nice today, but then we might freeze again next week. So it's just this constant cycle. It's like playing whack-a-mole with these potholes.
And I saw the city is struggling because you don't have asphalt plants up and running at this time of year, so they got to make their own, which means they have to prioritize only the big main roads. Eventually, when that asphalt starts coming, they can do a little bit more, but they're struggling to keep up.
When I talk about what I learned, so yes, hot asphalt factories do close for the winter, so the city creates its own supply. They do that by using their recycled material. How about this? Last year, the city created 982 tons of fill,
Okay, lay it on us.
equivalent to the weight of 150 African elephants.
Who comes up with this stuff? I mean, it's like a day in the life. Right now, we know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall. Right. In this case, now we know how much asphalt it takes for 150 African elephants to balance the scale.
So the city exactly, and the city says, "Hey, we're not an asphalt plant. We've got to stay, as you said, stick to the main roads. They don't have enough asphalt, to do everything." Interestingly enough, there are still 334 requests for service on these potholes that remain open, but just because one is closed, it doesn't necessarily mean those potholes have been filled. Sometimes they're duplicate requests.
Right.
It's an inaccurate location. So as of a couple days ago, the city data still shows 334 requests remain open. But as you said, an increase from last year certainly up 50%, according to Abby Marshall. And this is from the 311 request lines from the city.
And
their
1,500,
data.
1,500, not 15,000.
Correct.
Real quickly, the biggest pothole we've ever seen in Cleveland, that's the sinkhole that we have over on West 3rd Street at St. Clair. What's the story with that now?
Intersection still shut down. Repair work continues. Drivers are navigating detours. No clear timeline right now on when that intersection will fully reopen. Division of Water told Channel 5 crews are working as efficiently and safely as possible, but repairs could take weeks. As you mentioned, this is a massive sinkhole on the near west side.
My advice is just buy like 1,000 cans of Great Foam and just start spraying, right?
Yeah.
We'll get it
Packing
filled.
peanuts, something.
Sure. All right, there are many more stories to talk about here on the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable, including a chance for Karen to tell us what she'll be eating at the Guardians home opener. But first, let's hand it over to Stephanie Haney to tell us what's in store next week on the Sound of Ideas. Hey, Stephanie.
Mike, we've got a lot of variety coming up for you next week on The Sound of Ideas. On Monday, we'll be bringing you a conversation with women who are leading the way when it comes to innovation in artificial intelligence in Northeast Ohio. This is from a conversation that was held at the City Club of Cleveland. Then on Tuesday, we're talking about water safety for kids as things start to warm up finally here in Northeast Ohio. We'll be talking with leaders of Aqua Missions, and this is something we're producing in collaboration with students at Cleveland State University. Then on Wednesday, we'll be talking with people who are railing against the THC-infused products ban here in Ohio. This just went into effect on March 19th, and leaders in the industry are saying that it is not what they want. It's the Save Ohio Beverages campaign, so we'll hear from them. And then on Thursday, we bring you our latest installment of our music podcast, Shuffle, with IdeaStream's Amanda Rabinowitz. Of course, everything is subject to change if there is breaking news, but that's the lineup for now. And if you have something you'd like us to talk about on The Sound of Ideas, please send us a note. You can email us at soi@ideastream.org. Back to you in the studio, Mike.
Thank you, Stephanie. Sounds like a great lineup of shows. And if you're watching on WVIZ and don't listen to WKSU 89.7, WKSU, you should, because it's great substantive programming every morning at 9 a.m. They also play it at 9 p.m. A lot of ways to check that out and listen on radio, watch us on television on Friday nights. In like a lion, out like a lamb, or is it in like a lamb, out like a lion? It's something about March, but what if the lion and the lamb just keep trading places, which you just talked about, Glenn? It's happened every other minute in March in Cleveland. Weather roared Tuesday, spawning severe storms, packing near hurricane force wind last month of the year, or last day of the month. Torrential rains and at least one tornado. Power was out like a lion in a lot of places. Gabe, you went out and did a great piece on talking to some of the folks affected by this, but power was out really across the region in various spots.
Oh, yeah, it was pretty wild. In the entire state, it was like 120,000 people who were homes that had lost power. In Cuyahoga County, when I was chasing people up and down on Wednesday, it was about 20,000. Now across the state, it's about 1,100 people that are without power. So for the most part, repaired, but it took several days. And people are really complaining because, yes, it caused a lot of damage, but places had to close. I mean, like businesses had to close for a day or two, and that's struggling business. People are without power for a few days. I mean, you know, even to charge a phone, how reliant are we on our phones and technology these days? And I understand for a lot of people, they're saying, okay, well, this is weather, this happens. But a lot of people are complaining that this is happening frequently with First Energy. 3 times in the Tremont neighborhood, a lot of parts of the west side, Ohio City, 3 times for an extended period of time in the west side of Cleveland. And people are saying, like, this is a constant now. And you know, people are complaining about First Energy. We spent 20 minutes ago talking about First Energy and its scandal.
Right.
A year ago, I did some reporting in Lakewood where First Energy had held a town hall meeting to address issues and make these promises, and everybody was angry. So, you know, people are really upset about what First Energy is doing. And I spoke with a business owner, a bakery in Tremont called Levin, and he was talking about how he's, you know, this affects his business, yes, but he's upset with First Energy that he's considering switching companies. Can we hear from him?
Can we hear from him? I don't know.
We can.
Are we planning that?
3 days without revenue in the first quarter of the year, that's a big deal. It's a huge hit for my employees who aren't making money when we're closed. It's a huge hit for the bakery in general. It's pretty rough.
I love when the show surprises me.
Yeah.
That's my fault.
Live radio, live TV. I love it.
Right, but he was certainly upset to have to close his business for the day, which has happened 3 times this year. But he's really wants to hold it to First Energy to say like what is going to happen to fix these issues.
And I wonder if is it just First Energy, but Cleveland Public Power is
Cleveland
also.
Public Power lost, but not nearly as severely as First Energy.
Gotcha.
And in the last few months, it's been First Energy that's been the constant.
I should just call my daughter and get her on the air then, because she lives in
Yeah.
Lakewood and was again out. I was kind of happy because she came over for dinner.
Nice.
But the
Used
fact of
your
the matter
internet.
is they were out for 2 days, and I said, hey, are they getting that back on? And she goes, I think they get a pass this time because the lines behind my house melted, apparently hit by lightning or something of
Yeah.
that nature. But but a lot of people were without power. It always is a huge
Right.
ordeal for all of them. And in Wayne and Geauga County, tornadoes were confirmed during all of
Yes.
this. What caused all this power outage?
Yes, in Geauga County, there that we touched down on March 31st or this week, it was an F1 tornado, pretty severe tornado, about 100 miles per hour, caused some damage. Nobody was hurt, no one was harmed, but caused some damage. And then in Wayne County, it was an EF0 tornado. So we're talking about probably 70 miles per hour or less, but pretty severe. And I mean, pretty crazy to even think that that might see something. So, you know, like I said, damage to some buildings and some trees falling, but nobody harmed.
Karen, Joe did a feature on the State of Ohio, your television show, about how to be prepared.
Yeah, she looked into, there's a new tornado shelter in Delaware State Park, north of Columbus. And these things are there for people who don't have the ability to go to the basement. You know, they live in apartment buildings. They're unhoused. They need someplace to go. And it's unclear how many of those are happening in Ohio, how many of those are out there. About 375 shelters in general have been built with FEMA grants. But April is the worst.
FEMA?
I'm sorry, Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Thank you.
There
Carry
we
on.
go. But April is the month that a lot of people worry about in terms of tornadoes, because our most severe tornadoes in Ohio have happened in April, including the one in Xenia in 1974 where 33 people died and basically the city was torn down.
Yeah, be safe out there and don't mess around. If you get a tornado warning, you got a basement, use it.
Yep.
Right? Go on down. A grassroots effort to ban data centers in Ohio cleared another procedural hurdle yesterday when the Ohio Ballot Board approved proposed amendment language. Karen, now the real work begins for the supporters, and I've heard a lot of pessimism. We already have a ballot issue that's been going for months in regards to abolishing property taxes, and there are a lot of experts that say that's not going to make it across the finish line. Here we have folks starting months later. What is the handicapping on this?
Well, they need to get 413,487 valid signatures, which means they have to gather a lot more than that so that they can cover any signatures that are ruled invalid.
All right, somebody writes Mickey Mouse or something,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Or somebody's not a registered voter, because you have to be a registered voter to sign these petitions, and you're only supposed to sign a petition once. So if you sign more than once, that second signature gets thrown out. But you're right, the timeline is really short. I mean, 3 months. They have to have this done by July 1st.
Right.
Now, you can argue that abolishing property taxes and banning data centers of more than 25 megawatts per month are ideas that people are interested in, that people want to talk about. I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying, where do I sign these things?
Sure.
But without a strong organizational structure to really push these petitions forward, it's a really, really difficult hill to climb. And these folks are just getting started, so who knows what's going to happen.
And when we say these folks, the effort is being led from rural Brown and Adams counties. They're worrying about data centers changing the character of their counties. Not far from them in Pike County, a massive new data center was just announced. What do we know about that?
Yeah, that's on federal land. So and it's actually being fueled by a natural gas plant that's next to it. And this is a huge deal. This is land that is reclaimed from where the gaseous diffusion plant used to be in Portsmouth. Well, that's what it's called. It's not really in Portsmouth, but anyway. And this is one of the things that people point to is saying, oh, we don't want a data center this big, but also data centers, I mean, if you want to use your phone, if you want to use your laptop, if you want to do these things, data centers are part of that deal in a sense.
Well, AI is growing exponentially, and
well, and it's not
these
just
are
AI.
necessarily-
It's
right, that too,
yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah, and so what I think is interesting about the Piketon project is because that's federal land, there are no property taxes paid on that. Now, deals can be worked out to pay schools a certain amount of money, but there's no property taxes on that. So tying it back to the abolish the property tax movement.
Well, talking about deals being worked out, There's been opposition to data centers across the state, as that ballot effort shows, but Canton isn't necessarily opposed to them as long as they come in on the city's terms. That was a big part of the message from Canton Mayor Bill Scherer in his State of the City speech last night. The mayor says on the city's terms. What does he mean by that, Glenn?
Well, according to him, that means asking the hard questions. He says he's already started to ask these questions about environmental impact, the systems that will be used, kind of getting in the weeds here, but air-cooled or closed loop, the power grid, which is always a big concern, how it will affect the residents. And again, anytime a major business moves in, and this is, from Mayor Scheer, how do we ensure these companies invest in our community and not just exist in the community? So we had some reporting in Lorain County earlier from Matt Richmond and Zaria Johnson, where citizens were concerned that they were just, the commissioners were just kind of green lighting this and not asking these tough questions. That was the accusation. Bill Scheer in Canton says he is already asking these tough questions. And as you said, not necessarily opposed to them. He just wants to get all of the information and ask these hard questions.
And there's one that's being proposed for Canton, the area around Canton now. Interesting, Glenn. You've done a good job as the editor mentioning all three of the reporters that report to you. So you've given them all. He's here.
Gabe's here.
Exactly. All three of the other
You
reporters.
heard what he said about ICE and all those counties. I mean, he knows exactly.
So you didn't
what
have
he's
to say
talking
anything
about.
there.
Yeah. I'm
Go ahead,
only as good as the reporters make me look.
I agree. Wholeheartedly, I agree.
100%.
I just think it's interesting to see how the public opinion on data centers has changed, because a couple years ago, data centers were viewed as clean development, that they'll bring in high-paying jobs, and now you've got communities saying we don't want data centers, or we don't want big data centers, or we want to have questions, we want to bring in data centers on our terms. And it's quite a shift over the last couple of years.
And the other interesting thing with that Lorain County project, you've got Matt Dolan from Team Neo saying, well, we're not marketing this as a data center. We don't necessarily want a data center here. The people the residents are concerned about a data center coming in, which they believe will ultimately end up, construction jobs are great, but in terms of permanent jobs, how many do these data centers really create? So you've got the developers saying, well, no, we don't want it to be a data center. We want it to be something else. So you're right, Karen. It's interesting how the opinion has kind of changed on these.
Bill Scheer in his State of the City also addressed safety issues and discipline for officers. If you want to know more about that, you can check out Anna Huntsman's story on ideastream.org. She reports to Andrew Meyer, by the way, so I got that in for Andrew.
Yeah.
We'll try to get everybody mentioned in this program today.
Great team.
Moving on, though, to another story. Akron City Council has approved its $785 million 2026 operating budget. Most, as is the case with city budgets, is for personnel. There are also priorities for investing in public safety, youth programs, and neighborhood initiatives under the city's Together for Akron vision. Glenn, let's talk about the plan for hiring new staff, eliminating other positions in this budget.
Yeah, Mayor Shamus Malik calls it mission critical hiring. That's the only kind of hiring they're going to do. If it's, absolutely essential, mission critical, as I said. One change they're going to make, open positions won't be immediately posted. As you mentioned, personnel costs making up 72% of the general operating fund budget. They've already eliminated about 35 full-time positions through attrition. And we've heard this throughout really Northeast Ohio, Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, same thing in Akron. They're trying to reduce overtime for the police and fire really in any way they can. They say that early reforms in the fire department have saved over $90,000 in the first couple weeks, projected savings of $2.5 million. So they're looking at all these, bringing in consultants. They're talking about all these different systems, aligning best practices, all these kind of phrases that you hear in an effort to improve this efficiency.
How are they addressing public safety and overtime with the budget?
So they're looking to reduce it. They're looking to perhaps stagger some of these.
Wait, reduce overtime, not public safety.
Reduce the overtime.
Right?
Reduce the overtime.
Okay.
They don't want to reduce public safety. That's the goal, right?
Exactly.
Reduce overtime, but keep public safety at the level they're used to. So they look at some different things about staggering shifts. And things like that. New revenue sources, too, possibly reactivating some traffic cameras in school zones, selling or managing city-owned parking facilities. The 2026 budget also $13.4 million smaller than last year's budget. So they're looking at a number of measures and kind of shifting money around.
Okay, and total non sequitur, but Richard Cunningham, Taylor Wisner, I feel like it's the Academy Awards, and I have to mention every reporter. Those are folks that work with Justin Glanville. Who am I missing? I mean, there's multimedia journalists. It would go on forever.
Joe Ingles, Sarah
Joe
Donaldson.
Okay, there we
Dan
go.
Connor,
Connors. Let's go.
Connor Morris,
Oh, yeah?
working hard last night.
And by the way, we are going to be posting next week some job openings. We have some reporter positions and some associate producer positions open, including one for The Sound of Ideas. So do keep an eye on that if you're an aspiring journalist and would like to work for IdeaStream. Anyway, moving on.
Come hang out with us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fun, can't you tell?
Yeah, it's the greatest.
We're having a great time.
Akron police have new guidelines for dealing with protesters, including limits to tactics such as mass arrest, tear gas, and pepper spray usage. Gabe, what does this new policy say about use of force specifically?
So it's the tactics that they're changing. Essentially, pepper spray cannot be used indiscriminately or against people passively resisting. Tear gas now requires approval from an incident commander, and it must have advance warnings, and then provide some information about how to disperse and get away from it. So, they're looking for less lethal impact munitions to have. I mean, just make it less dangerous for people. Have people have the ability to get away safely. And this stems from an incident that happened a couple years ago in 2023 where people were protesting the lack of indictment results for the case of Jalen Walker, which happened in 2022. And some of our reporters were caught in some of that mess.
Yeah, Abigail Botar, who has since left. I mentioned job openings. Also, Igal Kaufman, who works with Jay Nungesser.
Yeah.
Am I getting all the names in there? I'm trying.
You want
Last of
I didn't get
thousands
the
here.
hearts.
We mentioned Lee Barr before. We've got Aya Cathy. We got everybody.
Rachel Rude, Drew Mazius. Okay, let's get back to news. We'll get the arts team in just a minute. The Medina County Budget Commission tried to claw back millions in tax money from schools, but failed because they blew the deadline. It's a big money relief for the Highland, Brunswick, Buckeye, and Cloverleaf school districts. Gabe, can they read a calendar?
Apparently not. I mean, this is an interesting situation. So I think the schools are probably pretty excited about this, but those who missed the deadline are saying that they wish they had more clarification and clear direction from the state, and that's why they say they missed the deadline.
And this county budget commission, that was given power last year, these budget commissions, Karen, to make these decisions about whether too much money is going to the schools. Glenn, why were they planning to claw back money?
Yeah, so you mentioned this is a new state law, state provision. This is under House Bill 309. It allows county commissions to lower voter-approved levies if the revenue is deemed unnecessary or excessive. That's one of the questions that came up through this Medina County issue. How does the state define unnecessary or excessive? How many millions, some districts in Medina County had tens of millions of dollars in carryover cash reserves. They say they need that for financial security. They need that for their 5-year plans and things like that. So one question that comes out of this is how does the state define unnecessary and excessive? This is fascinating to me. Critics say you're overturning the will of the voters. The voters have already approved this. They've approved these levy amounts. And so that's what critics of this process are saying, how can you overturn the will of the voters? We've seen a little bit of that with the marijuana laws, but this is a subject for another day, I suppose. I will say Medina County does have a strong GOP presence, strong Republican presence. They say they're looking out for the taxpayer dollars because these schools don't need millions in carryover funds. But the auditor said this has led to a lot of questions that they need to ask the
And
state.
this is the first time that a county has actually tried to claw back that money. They missed the deadline, so it didn't happen. But we can see this happen in a lot of places in Ohio.
And interestingly enough, they learned about the deadline after a related lawsuit was filed. So they were looking into this and they're like, oh, we missed the deadline to certify. I guess this is a dead issue for now.
Well, property taxes are a big issue, as Karen knows, covering in Columbus, and as we know, because IdeaStream is going to be embarking on a deep dive, our IdeaStream Explorers project, all about property taxes, all about how we fund everything here and what the burdens are for people and all of those things. So do stay tuned for that. We'll be reaching out to members of the community and starting our reporting that over the next couple of months. The Eastside Market, operated by a community development corporation in the midst of scandal, is now closed. Cleveland owns the property, canceled the lease. Gabe, the market was facing several financial issues, and I mentioned this kind of corruption backdrop, which Mike Polensek, the councilman there, has talked about.
Yeah.
Tell us more. Where are we at with that?
So the organization that ran the market, called Northeast Ohio Neighborhood Health Services, shortened by NEON, N-E-O-N, NEON, and not only were they not profitable, but they owed more than $200,000 in real estate taxes, about $50,000 in utility bills, and Neon was actually put on a payment plan back in 2023 to pay back taxes and failed to even complete those taxes. So like, they owed a lot of money. I was there yesterday, and someone came up to take some photos, and someone walked up to the store and said, I can't believe they're closed. So
Yeah.
not only is it that they closed, but they made that area again a food desert. So a place where there's not a grocery store within a mile radius, and food insecurity is a huge issue in that area. And I spoke to a woman who, her name's Erica Irvin. She builds community gardens across the city, primarily in the east side. Her very first one 10 years ago was in Glenville to help fix food insecurity there, and she's very concerned about where people are going to lean on for groceries now. And she's just encouraging people to lean on whatever resources they can to provide themselves with healthy options.
And the city is looking to get a new tenant, hopefully someone that
Yes.
can sell food.
And I spoke with Councilman Kevin Conwell yesterday, who said that, our plan, and he said he's hoping to work with the mayor, is to make a market more resemble the West Side Market. This, what they called the new East Side Market in Glenville, once upon a time was like that. It had these different stalls from local vendors, and now it just resembled a grocery store. A little bit more bare than most grocery stores, but they want to be more local vendors and look like what we have here on the West Side.
Okay. This is right up there with taking money from the collection plate or kicking an old lady's cane. Some miscreant stole a quarter of the Ashland High School Marching Band's instruments during their trip to perform at Disney World in Orlando. The instruments, many of which the students themselves owned, were not just lying around. Someone broke into a locked trailer at the hotel and ripped off their instruments.
Honestly, it's hard. You feel bad for these kids. This stuff was stolen. But I think they said about 20% of their instruments were stolen. They were lucky to keep the show going because a local high school helped them borrow instruments. The school helped the students find rentals for the period of time. And yeah, it's just so mean to just take
It's
people's
mean, it's
stuff.
terrible. But I gotta say, they had some pluck. These band directors were like, "Hey, the show must go on," and they went out. First of
Yeah.
all, they did a GoFundMe and got some money.
Yeah.
But they went out to these local instrument rental places and got every kid their instrument or an instrument they could play, including the saxophone player, which was the one they couldn't get. And
Yeah.
someone from another band was staying over with their parents and said, "I'll loan you
I
mine."
have one. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's very nice. I think community coming together. They found the instruments they needed. The GoFundMe right now is at $8,325.
Wow, last I
So
checked, it was like 3,500.
it's like
so-
double than what it was yesterday.
And they've
so.
already got the instruments, but they're saying, hey, we can definitely use this to pay the cost of the trips and
Yeah.
just basically to support that. But yeah,
Yeah.
whoever stole those instruments, boo to you.
And go Ashland Arrows.
Yeah. Go Ashland Arrows. Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
Like Akron Arrows, like they used to be?
ARROW.
Oh, okay. Somewhat different.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about nicknames. How about Guardians? Do you like those, Karen? Yeah. Okay. There she is. She got her.
Ooh,
Take a look here.
scarf.
She's got her Guardians
Nice.
stole on. What is that?
yeah.
A scarf.
Yes.
They'll take on the Chicago Cubs, weather permitting, at Progressive Field this afternoon in the sold-out home opener, the 33rd straight sellout of a home opener. It's Good Friday today, and I remember in years past when Bishop Anthony Pilla gave opening day dispensation to those who abstained from meat on Friday for Lent so you could have a hot dog. No such edict this time, so it's popcorn and Cracker Jacks for those who are observing the Lenten admonition, although you can't really have the popcorn that's the new offering from Steak. It's tallow popcorn,
Yeah.
tossed in beef tallow butter with steak seasonings. Is that meat?
Yeah.
Maybe
I-
not.
It sounds like
Beef
it.
tallow.
It's meat-ish.
Play it safe just in case.
Yeah.
All right, how many of these sold-out home openers have you been to?
I actually went back and looked, and not as many as I have always wanted to go to. Let's just put it that
Okay.
way. But yeah, I've been to every one. I even was supposed to go to the one in 2020 that got moved then until July because of COVID. So I'm
All right.
excited.
Well, I'm excited too, and I wanted to get that in there because you needed to have it. But we also have to talk about the IAX Indoor Amusement Park Ferris wheel. Now, when the amusement park closed, the Ferris wheel moved to Canton, and
Yes.
it was in the Hall of Fame Village there. And now they say it's no longer in their plans. What are they going to do with the Ferris wheel, real quickly, Glenn?
Yeah, they're getting out of the amusement ride business. They want to focus on football, but it can be yours. That former IX Center, now Village Ferris wheel, can be yours for $500,000.
That's
Anybody
it.
want to pony up for
500
that?
grand, you got room in your backyard. Let's do it. All right, that wraps the show for today. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Gabe, as well. And Karen, such a treat to have you in studio.